Picture this: a bill signed into law that declared an entire system, slavery, illegal across a vast empire, freeing hundreds of thousands of people. But it wasn't a clean sweep. Some chains remained, some voices went unheard, and the legacy of injustice lingered. On August 28, 1833, the British Crown gave royal assent to the Slavery Abolition Act, a momentous turn in history, but also the start of a complicated journey toward true freedom. Welcome to Earth Sights on this day series. Today, we will look into the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, which transformed the British Empire by legally ending slavery and how this would lead to the banning of slavery globally. We'll explore the steps leading up to the act, describe exactly what it changed, highlight its limitations, and discuss its long-lasting impact. The anti-slave movement in Great Britain broke ground with the verdict of the Somerset case, 1772. Lord Mansfield declared that there was no law that permitted slavery in Britain and no law that supported it. The result of this judgment made people question that if any slave stepped foot on British soil, then could they no longer be considered a slave, and therefore slavery throughout the British Empire may also be unlawful. On the 4th of February, 1794, the French revolutionaries passed a law banning slavery in France and all its colonies and became the first European nation to do so. However, Napoleon Bonaparte revoked the law just 8 years later on the 20th of May, 1802 in many of the colonies in the West. With Napoleon defeated by 1815, France began the process of completely outlawing slavery in all their colonies by the 27th of April, 1848. The United Kingdom abolished the slave trade throughout the empire on the 25th of March, 1807. Britain then began to use its power in the world to convince other nations to also ban slavery. The United States banned its slave trade in the Atlantic in 1808, but would continue the trade extensively at home, finally making slavery and the slave trade illegal in December 1865. However, only 27 of the 36 states ratified the 13th Amendment, which banned slavery. It was not until 1995 that the final state of Mississippi ratified the 13th Amendment, and this was not official until the 7th of February, 2013. In 1810, Portugal signed the Strangford Treaty with Britain in Rio de Janeiro, where Britain called for the gradual disuse and ultimate and not distant abolition of the slave trade. This led to the end of the slave trade in its South American colonies by 1836 and all its colonies by 1869. Slavery in the Portuguese mainland was abolished in 1761. When Brazil gained independence in 1822, it returned to slavery, but it was finally abolished there in 1888. In similar treaties with Britain, Sweden banned the slave trade in 1813 and slavery on the 9th of October, 1847. At the signing of the Paris Treaty on the 30th of May, 1814, which ended the Napoleonic Wars, France agreed with Britain that the slave trade was repugnant to the principles of natural justice. France agreed to abolish the slave trade and slavery, which was complete in 1848. In 1815, both the Royal Navy and the French Navy began to actively patrol the western coast of Africa to prevent the continuation of the slave trade. The act applied to most British colonies, places like the Caribbean, South Africa, and parts of Canada. In those areas, slavery was declared illegal, and the law promised freedom to those previously enslaved. More than 800,000 people were affected. Some territories, however, were excluded, notably those controlled by the East India Company, including Ceylon, Sri Lanka, and St. Helena. Slavery would only later be outlawed there in 1843. The government allocated a staggering £20 million, around 40% of the nation's annual budget, to compensate owners for their lost property. Taxpayers footed the bill, but the people freed received no restitution. Slavery also, in some cases, transitioned to an apprenticeship system, which in some cases continued exploitation, but campaigners like Joseph Sturge pressured the government, and the apprenticeships were terminated in 1838. On August 28, 1833, the Slavery Abolition Act became law, ending legal slavery in much of the British Empire. But it was not an absolute victory. With its financial compensation to owners apprenticeship system, and territory exemptions. The act was both a triumph of abolitionist will and a compromise that still haunts our history. It reminds us, social progress is often messy and incomplete. While people demand justice, lawmakers negotiate. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey meaningful, please like, subscribe, and share to help more people learn about this pivotal moment in history. Let me know in the comments, what strikes you most about the Slavery Abolition Act? What lessons should we carry forward? Your thoughts matter. Until next time, keep exploring the past so we can understand our present and shape a better future.